Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and issues related to those issues. Today I want to continue on my series on basically debunking some of these arguments for the existence of God and why they no longer work for me. And I'm also trying to help the apologists by how in the world you would fix them. And so today we're taking on the cosmological argument. This is what was voted in this week, and so here we are. Honestly, I think this one's dead. I know a lot of apologists keep trying to resurrect it, but it has such an obvious flaw that it almost has zero value, okay, in any kind of argument for the existence of God. It really has that big of an issue. But for the rest of the series, we only have one argument left, and that's the theological argument, and then I'm going to close out the series with a final video on all the arguments for the existence of God and why many of them are just plain a moot point. And so we'll talk about that when we get there. But today it's the cosmological argument. So what is the cosmological argument? Well, simply stated, it goes something like this. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, up to this point, you won't see too many people actually object. I don't object per se, other than the assumption that a cause is necessary to have something exist. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of ignorance about the existence of the universe. Now, we also have to define what we mean, because this argument talks about the universe. It doesn't talk about the cosmos. So the cosmos may very well be larger than the universe. It may be something that continues on after this universe dies and was before the universe existed. So no argument there for just talking about the universe. If you went cosmos, I might have some objections saying, well, whatever, don't really know that. But we're just talking about the current existent universe. Okay, fine. Therefore, the universe has a cause because the universe began to exist, and everything that begins to exist has a cause. Okay, I'll buy that. Let's grant all that for the sake of argument. I don't really have a problem with any of that. Seems fairly straightforward. It's what theists do next with this argument that becomes the real problem, because they add a fourth premise. That cause is God. Now, why do they say this? Why do they come up with this example? Because they feel that, and according to William Lane Craig's own video, and I'm using stuff directly from him, he says that cause has to be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and powerful. Let's take all of these on. That's a pretty big assumption that it was spaceless. It is quite possible that the singularity does take up space, okay, as current cosmological models show. It's quite possible that the singularity, being pure energy, that energy still may take up space. And we don't know what existed before the singularity, so that could have had space too. It's pure grade A assumption that it was spaceless. We don't know that for sure. In fact, as we go through all these five things, the biggest answer is, really, we don't know. You're just kind of conjecturing. Okay, and what you say actually doesn't line up necessarily to God either. Timeless, we don't know that either. Yeah, sure, time gets really funky the closer you get to the singularity when you read this stuff. Trust me, I've tried to read some of this stuff and it makes my head swim at certain points, but the math makes sense to a certain extent. For somebody who doesn't know calculus very well, such as myself, it makes sense to a point. And I have had friends look at it and say, yeah, pretty good solid stuff. But it doesn't necessarily imply that things are timeless. There could have been a time before the singularity, and then we would be able to march backwards from that. Who knows? Maybe the fluctuating view of the universe, where the universe contracts and crushes into a singularity and then becomes the next universe, maybe that's the case. Maybe there's a hint of this in some of the mythology. Who knows? Immaterial, we don't know that either. In fact, if there's anything that seems to be eternal, it may be energy. Energy that becomes mass and then converts back into energy, back and forth. First and second law of dynamics kind of says, hey, you can't destroy energy or matter, but they can convert from one to another. A lot of people, the second law of thermodynamics says that we're running down, that we're losing energy. But that only applies to closed systems, so it doesn't necessarily follow that it applies in all systems. So, I don't know, that doesn't really help, and it doesn't necessarily prove that anything's immaterial. Immaterialism doesn't really plan into it. We don't know that the origin of the universe, what caused the universe, was immaterial. We don't know that at all. For uncaused, we don't know that either. It may be the singularity that is proposed came from another collapsing universe, which then that would be the cause of the singularity. People go infinite regression at this point, but there is no evidence that the universe hasn't always existed, okay, and will continue to do so, that the cosmos will continue to go on regardless of the number of universes, whatever. We don't know. The fact of the matter is we straight up don't know. And the fact that it doesn't need to be powerful either. It doesn't take much to get something going. Click over the first domino and a whole bunch of dominoes fall over. Drop a pebble at the top of a snowfield and you might get an avalanche at the end of it. I know for a fact as a kid that I made a small snowball once, rolled it down a hill, and it became a big snowball very quickly. But it started small and it didn't have to be very powerful for it to begin to gain power. That's a pretty gross assumption too. So what do I think about all these 5 qualities? Spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, powerful? Pure conjecture. You don't know. Okay, so you're making this stuff up. So what ultimately is the flaw? What is the fallaciousness of the cosmological argument? Well, that's pretty simple. It's an argument from ignorance. We don't know what caused the universe, and that's an honest answer, the most honest answer. So what do theists do? Well, we don't know, so therefore it must be God. Now, this argument has been going on for a long time for a lot of things over, like, literally millennia, among many deities, okay? For a long time, the Norse people believed that lightning was caused by Thor, okay? Well, later on we discovered how lightning is formed and created by purely naturalistic causes, so we didn't need the agency of Thor anymore. There was already other agency following natural physical laws that provided that agency. The fact of the matter is, every time we've had this, well, I don't know where something comes from, we eventually go and find a naturalistic cause for it. And that has been pretty much the track record of science versus mythology. That science comes along and says, sorry, no, this is the way it really works, no God required. And I'm going to conclude that we will eventually, if we live long enough and exist long enough, we could probably come up with a pretty good explanation that requires no God for any of this. And certainly not one that is necessarily spaceless, timeless, immaterial or uncaused or powerful. Not necessarily so. We don't know that. This is classic what we call God of the gaps. We have a gap in our knowledge, and so people like to throw God in there. The problem is the gaps are getting smaller and less frequent, and things are shrinking. And so where God of the gaps can be used, that's getting more and more, less and less. What this does, though, is because it is an argument from ignorance, it completely nullifies the argument at premise 4. You can keep your premises 1, 2, and 3, but that doesn't prove a damn thing about God. In fact, it doesn't even mention God. It's the 4th thing where you say, therefore, that causes that and that causes God. That's the problem, okay? Because you don't know that. And you can't just throw God in there because we don't know. That's an argument from ignorance, okay? And it's a classic argument from ignorance. So God of the gaps, we don't know, is a more proper answer. So I can kind of discard this argument. Well, how would I fix it? Well, you'd have to prove that the cause is actually God, which requires not a philosophical argument. It requires actual, proving that. I don't think you can. I think the problem with humanity is we are way too limited in our understanding of the universe to maybe ever come up with this now. But the cosmological argument just basically proves that the universe has a cause. And then whatever cause you try to put in there is complete conjecture because we just don't know. If I propose something as an atheist that's naturalistic, I'm still arguing from ignorance, and it's not proof that what I say is true. I could say, a previous universe was the cause of this, and therefore it has some space, it has time, it's material, but I would still be standing on grounds that is complete ignorance too, and I would be making an argument from ignorance. So I'm not going to do that. The thing is, I'm going to discard this argument because it's not very useful. It doesn't prove a damn thing. Okay, it just proves that maybe the universe has a cause, although some people would argue that maybe it doesn't. Okay, I'm not one of those people, but at the same time, I realize I can't throw any explanation into something that is more properly answered. I do not know. That's a real problem, I think, with theists. Theists don't like that answer, and they don't like the fact that it's true. Our ignorance is often the answer for stuff, but we want to throw in whatever answer there because we like that answer better. But our desire to have a likable answer doesn't prove anything, and God isn't there. I want to deal with a comment on the last one on the ontological argument. I made the statement that the ontological argument that William Lane Craig says that premises 2 through 6 aren't disputed. And I said, oh, the hell they're not. And one of the commenters got into me about, well, it just philosophically follows. I said, I don't care, okay? I want to give a final answer. I don't care that maybe 2 through 6 do philosophically follow. Maybe I would agree to that. But what Craig said is that there was no controversy about them, that everybody accepts them. And that's not true. Okay, now, as far as a lot of atheists who object to this aren't philosophers, the fact of the matter is a lot of atheists go into philosophy. A lot of them go into it, in fact, with the idea of the arguments for the existence of God, and sometimes they start out as theists, but at the end they come out of it. But there's a whole list of, just go to Wikipedia and, type up atheists with degrees in that are philosophers, and you'll get a flippin' long list. I'm going to tell you right now, I got one that I just read. This guy, Massimo Puglisi is an atheist, and he wrote How to Be a Stoic, and I believe he has a degree in philosophy. So the idea that atheists don't know philosophy, well, are you telling me that none of those people ever attacked those things and said that there's a problem with them? Come on. Okay, what Craig is doing is what a lot of apologists do. They like to do that backhanded thing where they say, well, there's no problems with this part of the argument. Everybody agrees to it, so that none of their audience really looks at that very closely. If he was really genuinely honest, he would say, I don't think people find these controversial, but you should look at them and make sure. Make sure you read them, make sure you examine them, and make sure you don't have any problems with it. That would be the intellectually honest thing to do. But my problem with William Lane Craig, even when I was a Christian, is I had a lot of problems with his honesty. And I also had a lot of problems with some of the way he handles objections, because he tends to drop into the personal innuendo against his opponents rather than actually dealing with their opponent's arguments. I found his handling of Bart Ehrman a little bit disingenuous when he basically says, oh, you're just using that, Hume argument that's old and tired out and worn out, the improbability of miracles. And that's not what Bart Ehrman was doing at all. He's saying in history we just don't do that. But the other thing about that is it casts aspersions on the Humean argument against miracles, and I'm sorry, I don't remember that everybody has dismissed that one either. And that's a little bit disingenuous on Hume's part, because, if he's going to sit there and say that Hume's argument is old and tired and out of date or whatever, then, the cosmological argument's been around for a long time. The ontological argument, all these arguments for the existence of God have been around for a long time, and a lot of people have debunked them. My point is, he's absolutely disingenuous to say that there's no controversy about those presidents or everybody accepts them, pretty much accepts them. That's a load of crap. They don't. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether you have a philosophy degree or not. And I want to deal with that issue too. Just because you don't have a philosophy degree doesn't mean you can't study logic or philosophical systems or these arguments and ask yourself the question, is this convincing? Anybody can do that. The whole point of these arguments is to convince people that there is a God. But, if you're not going to be honest about it, that's a problem, okay? But the fact of the matter is, anybody can learn it. Now, as for my own personal experience in dealing with these philosophical arguments for the existence of God, I had them first really presented to me in Bible college during my systematic theology class, I think was the first time, and then during my apologetics class. So I had them twice in Bible college, and I had them one more time in seminary, where we were dealing with philosophical theology, and in particular the problem. And we had philosophical theology, which was a class, and then I took a follow-up class called the problem of evil. In both of those, we examined all these arguments because they were related to the subject. Okay, so in theology, sometimes the first task of the theologian is to prove that God exists, and philosophical arguments are the way that they're used. So I've seen these a lot, okay? And I had problems with all of them almost immediately, okay? As a Christian and as a theist, I had problems with these. In fact, I eventually got to the point long before I deconverted that I rejected all of them. I was trying to find another one. I was trying to create another one because I realized how bad all of these are, okay? Because they all have fallacies and they all deal with problems. So I'm discarding that. But just because somebody doesn't have a philosophical degree doesn't mean they can't have objection to premises and philosophical arguments that are valid. The whole point of logic and the whole point of proving validity and truthfulness is that anybody can ultimately do it if they study it. That's the whole point. And it really comes off a little bit as ivory tower that somehow these atheists don't have philosophical degrees, so they must be in error. Comes off as really ivory tower, okay? They may very well have a legitimate objection. I think I have legitimate objections. Despite the lack of a philosophical degree, I've studied this shit in many other of my classes, okay? So it's not like it's unfamiliar to me, and I've definitely looked at it myself on my own over the years. I rejected all of these arguments long before I became an atheist because I think they're all flawed and fallacious. And as a theologian, I was actually trying to come up with new ones because I felt that we needed to pull back from apologetics, completely scrap it and start over. Because from my perspective, as I was looking at apologists, even back as early as the 90s, I felt that they were horribly flawed and we were in a sad state. We needed something far, far better. And so, yeah, sorry, I don't accept that 2 through 6 are genuine. I think there are some problems with those premises, mostly the assumption that something exists that because it exists, okay, which is in all of the premises, which means that they all have a problem. If something exists, therefore it exists. It's better that a maximally great whatever exists in all the premises. Well, sorry, that's a problem, and I discard it, okay, because of that reason, not because of anything else. It's really begging the question, because you're literally using the same thing in every premise. Well, that means there's controversy about all the premises put together, and that's just true. And for William Lane Craig to say that there's not a real problem, when I see a lot of atheists, including ones with philosophy degrees, saying, no, that's bullshit, okay, that's BS. Okay, there are some objections here because we object to the terminology, okay, which is a lot of problems with a lot of these philosophical arguments, is a lack of definition of terminology or terminology that is very badly defined. So just keep that in mind. I don't like to get after people, but it's like, dude, just because William Lane Craig says something doesn't make it true. Okay, there are people that take on all the premises of that argument, and rightly so. Well, thank you for stopping by. I think that's the end of this one. Sorry to hang around for a little bit longer and deal with an issue. Currently, at present, we are at 988 subscribers and 2832 watch hours. So we are 168 watch hours away from memberships. So it's getting very, very close. It's growing all the time. Once I get that up and running, I'll probably renew my Patreon accounts and get that up and running, PayPal as well. Try to make a little money at this gig so it kind of justifies my time. Yes, I've made it very clear that there are 3 goals to this channel. 1 is to make money, 2 is to entertain, and 3 is to make you think. I hope I've done all 3 today, and I appreciate you all stopping by. And, like, share, do the things that you do. This channel is becoming successful because of you, so thank you very, very much. Make sure you live your best life. You only get one go around. And make it a good one, make it a happy one. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you again next time.